Good morning, everybody. Hope you can hear me at the back. Is that right? I've been told we're being filmed today, so I'm not allowed to wander around. It's a shame because I like to wander, so if I do wander and Keith waves at me, I'm not doing anything wrong. He just wants to make sure it's captured on video. A couple of announcements before I start. First of all, a legal disclaimer. This presentation is my views. It's not representing AXA PPP Healthcare, the AXA Group, and any other legal disclaimers. And also apology. The slides of black and white bullets. Talking to Keith, he says, I want you to make it sexy and interesting. And he sent me a link through to the iCloud, but when I clicked on it, all the photos had disappeared. So apologies for that. And then you've just got the basic presentation. So the title was The Importance of Getting a Single Customer View Across Multiple Sales or Product Channels. What does that actually mean? Well, what I'm going to do in this presentation is give an overview of a single customer view, and then have a bit of a discussion about the real value of a single customer view. Why do we need one? How do I get one? Now I've got one, can I make it work? How can I enhance its value? Moving on to personalisation and then some conclusions. So, what is a single customer view? So, according to Experian, and I'm aware I've got CACI in the room, it's a readily accessible, consistent summary, and you can read the rest of a customer's product relationships. Now, I think several years ago, and this is still sort of an ambition of many organisations, to try and pull together this single customer view, but it's very challenging, and particularly in terms of this sort of readily accessible, how easy is it to pull the information together? Why do you want to do it? What's the value? Well, actually, if you do pull this together, you should be able to understand a customer's history, the value, and from a financial services point of view, what is the risk, how are they exposed to debt, and their level of product holding. So, why do we need one? Well, as Experian have defined their business benefits, so opportunities to cross-sell if we've got a good understanding about what your current product holdings are. Customer benefits, actually, theoretically, it should be easier and simpler. Identity verification, so what do we mean by that? Well, wouldn't it be great if actually you're looking to buy a new product, the fields about name, address, they know, they understand, it's an organisation working with you as a customer. Fraud reduction, so there's a lot of work that goes on in both the private and public sector, trying to identify individuals using different components of data to pull it together to see actually, is that person the same person, even though we've got different names and information. Again, crime and security requirements, using fuzzy logic, different algorithms to try and identify through patterns of behaviour, is this the same person or is it different, or are there some relationships there? And then again, from a financial services requirement, there's a regulatory requirement under the Financial Services Compensation Scheme that we've got to meet a 72-hour target when requested for product holdings for a particular customer. So we've got 72 hours after we're asked to actually pull together to enable the compensation scheme to identify what the total product holding somebody has, and so what's their entitlement. So how do I actually get one? Firstly, agree the definition of a customer. Actually, what do you actually mean? Is it the individual? Is it the household? Is it a particular segment? How do you pull that information together? Then data matching, traditionally using something like customer name, address, date of birth, telephone number. And if you've ever been involved in this kind of exercise, you'll find that customers change their name, they move. Date of birth is usually consistent, but not usually filled in. Telephone number changes dynamically a lot as well. Or you can use your unique customer identifier. Again, when you do a lot of this, you'll find overlaps, different mechanisms within organisations about different customer identifiers. Loyalty card number, that's great if you've got a loyalty card scheme. And then simply, you combine all the data, it's as simple as that, and you've got this lovely single customer view. So, now I've got one, I actually want another one. I've pulled all this information together. What is it actually showing me? So does it show me where else they shop, for example? Does it show me what they've bought when they've not used their loyalty card? Does it show, is it in terms of accuracy? Do I assume they're using their card all the time? Do they only use it for particular kind of purchases? Does it really reflect reality? So do we make purchasing decisions in isolation, or do we make them as groups? Thinking about booking the family holiday, buying a car. There's a lot of decisions that may be taken at the household level or the individual level, and we need to pull that together, where for, say, one individual in a household, we might have some information, but not on the other members of the household. So actually, if we pull it all together, does it really work? How do we update it, clean it, maintain it? A lot of the time, this is in disparate databases. Are we getting real-time data feeds, and are we checking it and challenging it all the time? So in terms of missing pieces of data, where are there opportunities to go and find that out? What is that real coverage? And actually, linking to the theme of this conference, actually how can this exchange of data develop to the benefit of all concerned? Do we need to know what's going on at an individual level? Do we need to know what's happening in particular segments? So using something like the OAK classification system, becoming a bridge between the private and public sector, or using other third-party classifications as well. I assume they're available from CACI. So in terms of thinking about how we can unlock the value and some steps that we can take, the World Economic Forum suggests 3 approaches. So in terms of communicating with customers, firstly, moving from this transparency to understanding. So actually, how can we engage with individuals to explain to them why we're collecting this information, what we're using it for? It's actually, these are the consequences, these are the benefits to you. But also moving from that passive consent to engaged individuals. So if you give us some information, what's the benefit to you? We've got this binary yes, no, actually is maybe a better solution. So if people understand why they're giving us this information, then as we go forward and they can see the tangible benefits, then they may change their mind from a box they ticked when they took a product out 10 years in the past. Moving from this black and white to shades of grey, actually, yeah, really focusing on this context. Life is complicated. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of data being exchanged at the moment. I'll go and talk about that in a minute. But actually, how can we pull this information together, let them understand the benefits of it, and move forward? So what other options are there for getting this information? Well, you can actually buy the data from consumers. There's a company called Handshake that enable consumers to sell their data to providers and to retailers and other interested bodies on a frequent basis. So they're saying, we'll sell you our data, we'll tell you what we're buying, we'll tell you where we are, what we're doing, but we want some financial reward in response to that. You can also harvest data from wearable technology. So wristbands like Aviva, we're giving away a Fitbit earlier this year, so £80 worth of health kit, on the understanding that actually you would let them, you would share your data with them, so they had an understanding about what you're doing and potential implications on your insurance premium, but also what levels of activity you were doing. So mobile phones, I was reading today, I think your mobile phone talks to a base point every 7 seconds. Not only is it harvesting your locations now, there's big business in terms of what are you searching for, how are you interacting, what data is being leaked from apps. So they reckon you can get about 500 data points an hour from the standard mobile phone. Other devices, BA have been testing not really sure on the logic of this, but it's a colour-changing blanket for their transatlantic first-class flyers, which measures the stress, and according to that, then the flight crew will, I don't know, leave you alone or look after you or do something, but it's a nice little story in the press about the use of technology, discuss. And there's, my personal favourite is there's also an American company who've developed a nappy that has reactable QR codes that become activated if they detect particular enzymes in the nappy based on trying to measure kidney function. So there are means and mechanisms out there that are continually evolving for providing information. But who's actually going to be willing to share the data? Well, there's a legal trade in pseudonymous data, I'm assured is a European Union term, which means actually you can legally buy people's postcode, gender, age, which can enable matching, and Harvard's data privacy lab, they did some work in data sets in the States, and they got up to 90% matching at the individual level, and that was matching health records which had been put into the public domain, which had been anonymised, with the electoral roll. Now, that's using the zip code and that's using the date of birth, whereas in the UK it's age. But that was quite a shock to me in terms of what's going on there in data. And if anybody's interested, the latest copy of Wired magazine, I don't know if you've read it, but got a nice warning the data industry is selling your life article, talking about what's going on and some of the changes that have been happening. So, actually, how did people feel about sharing their data? Demos have got a report called the Data Dialogue. So they've sort of asked people, and they reckon that it's about half are sort of up for sharing their data, and the other half are a bit more wary. So 30% think they're sort of non-sharers. We know about it. You're not going to have it. Skeptics, why do you want it? And then pragmatists that say you're probably going to get it. Value hunters, commercial value, and enthusiastic sharers that will bore you senseless with lots of Facebook information. Sorry, personal opinion there. Right, but in terms of apps, I've come across this lovely term of data leakage. So there's quite a few apps that actually share your information. So MyFitnessPal and Fitbit and My Pregnancy Today, when you enter the information on those apps and then visit various other websites, through the boxes you've ticked when you've ignored all the T's and C's, that information, so on My Pregnancy Today, your due date gets shared with other third parties, which you may not necessarily be aware of when you actually signed up to the app. So, being a dynamic industry, as we moved on from this single customer view to personalisation, we've got a new name for trying to move forward in terms of having a one-to-one relationship with our customers. I've nicked this from Gartner. So things have moved forward. It's not selling to segments or personas. It's actually more meaningful than that. It's not showing them a particular product because other people who live where they live have then gone on and bought something else. And it's about delighting the customer to keep them returning. Now, it's quite interesting looking at this, and I'll come on to another slide, in terms of this is very much what the consultancies, the industry are talking about, and then we'll see what customers think about this going forward. So personalisation is an activity that creates a unique and relevant interaction that enhances the relationship with an individual. Well, I think it's a great optimistic ambition, but is it really being achieved? So these are useful views, as I said, from the industry, but it's not necessarily what customers want. So if we look at what's going on with the industry, it's saying, looking at your historical insights and your characteristics, we're going to give you this delightful transaction. So Disney World in Florida is spending $1 billion, not inconsequential amount of money, behind My Magic Plus. And the key part of this is their Magic Band. So this is a wristband, which is RFID. So it's your hotel room, your credit card, your admission ticket. It knows what rides you've gone on, what other information you've added to that. And they can mine that information, and they're quite proud of the fact that it'll enable staff to wish you a happy birthday on your birthday if you're in the park on that day. I'd just rather queues were smaller myself, but that's my particular view. So moving on to consumers, we heard before about the industry and sort of their particular views about personalisation and moving forward. Some research by Bloomreach done last month, 80% of UK consumers actually feel that Amazon offers the most online personalised customer experience, and it makes them purchase more frequently. Because when you're actually thinking about a present for a nephew and you haven't really got a clue what to buy them, having 7 ideas pop up means that you don't have to spend beyond 5 minutes putting a great deal of thought into whatever can be purchased and shipped off and tick the box. And I think that's something, there is quite an interesting gap between this view of the industry about personalisation, but also what customers want as well. And 60% of UK online shoppers actually believe that online shopping is more personal experience than actually shopping in store. And that contrasts significantly with 13% of retailers with that view. So people are saying, I'm going on that website, it feels like it's all about me, rather than going into a store where you might have 50,000 lines of product and it's a bit too much. And there's some interesting retail trends coming to light at the moment. Also, the final bullet point here, a third of online shoppers believe that online personalisation is the most important component in their shopping experience, compared to 2% of online retailers. So again, this big gap between what do customers want and then actually what does the industry think they want. So I'm going to move on and do the very dangerous thing of self-referencing. So I'm going to tell you a story about me and my mobile phone. Now, I've done the legal disclaimer and I'm not allowed to mention the company concerned, so I'll call them Oxygen, just to give you an idea. Gag for the chemists. Right, so I've got 3 mobile phones with the same mobile phone company and I've linked them all together. It's starting to come together for me. I can go on the website, I can see the bills together, I've got an idea what's going on. I should point out, actually, it's my wife and my son have got them, I just don't have 3 mobile phones myself. I'm due an upgrade. I had no idea I was due an upgrade, but they sent me a text and said, I'm ready to upgrade, I'm going to get a new phone. And better still, there's a nice exclusive offer coming my way. They're going to call me soon, but if I can't wait, I can visit my local shop. I go to the shop. There is no exclusive offer. There's no record of my other phone contracts. I can't get the phone I want. He said, what phone do you want? That one. You can't have it. He then said, I can't do you any deals. You're better off ringing customer services because they might be able to do you a deal. So I ring customer services, wait for 20 minutes saying how valuable and important I am, and then get bored and hang up. 5 days later, I get a text saying I'm eligible for an exclusive upgrade offer and go to the shop and show them the phone. I'm thinking of changing my mobile phone provider. Well, because I was being organised and actually sent these slides to Keith about a week ago, subsequent update. I've been sent a survey asking about my experience on the phone. They got quite low scores. I was then sent another survey saying they were very interested in my low scores and could I answer the same questions they sent me originally because it's really important for them to understand their customers. And I've heard nothing back since. So, coming to the end of my little amble. Conclusions and observations. I think a single customer view is a great start. You've got to be practical, but the challenge for me is, what else are you missing? What other data are your customers or prospects willing to give you? Can you engage with them? Can you help this personalisation? Can you help this tailoring? Importantly, hopefully with that last example, what is the reality of your customer experience? I know there's a multi-million-pound data warehouse behind my experience with the aforementioned mobile phone company. It just didn't work for me. It didn't engage me, certainly didn't delight me, and I'm fairly simple. So, how do your own internal views, as a final thought, on concepts like personalisation actually match your customers' views? Are you giving them what they want? Are you really thinking about what they want? Or is it the opportunity for us to end up with personalised, delightful solutions whilst missing the trick in terms of what are the key things that are really important to the customers? Right. Without further ado, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Martin. I love the bit about Disney. The idea of being stalked around parts of France by Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs fills me with a degree of alarm. So we've got hopefully about 10 minutes of questions. So if anybody does have any questions, if I could ask people to just stick your hand up. I don't think we've got roaming mics. So you may have... Oh, we do. Oh, brill. I didn't see them in the corner. So we've got a roving mic, so hopefully we can get a mic to you. But if people could also say who they are and where they're from, that would be great. So any questions?
You said a great deal about a single customer record within the organisation. You didn't mention my data or what happens when the customer wants to see the data that you hold about him. Yes, they can do a data protection request, but that's very cumbersome. That's not necessarily what they want. Whereas what would actually be very helpful, I'd like to see my itemised shopping list, be able to download those. I'd like to see exactly the view that companies I deal with have of me. How can that be delivered?
Well, I think legally, to meet the requirements, they are meant to be delivering some stuff. I think in terms of access to online purchasing patterns, there are some mechanisms available, but you've got to sign up to shop to use them. Looking in the our industry in terms of the health arena, there's some interesting discussions going on at the moment about theoretically in this day and age you should be able to have medical records in an easily transferable and consistent digital format. We've got a newish hospital in Tunbridge Wells, and I know one of the electricians who works there. They've been scouring the country for fax machines because that's the single most important mechanism for communicating between GP services, surgery, and sharing information due to email issues, different systems trying to talk to each other. And I think this is part of, as we develop as an industry and develop as a community with, public-private sector, we need to start at those basics. And can we agree the name, date of birth and address overlapping? And I know the identity database was scrapped, but is there something as we move forward with apps and technology that actually, as a consumer, what's the benefit to you? If you want to share some of your retail purchasing behaviour, you can do. Do you get a reward for it? There's a company in Australia that actually enables you to submit your shopping data to enable you to be targeted for sampling purposes. So I'm a great believer in actually, can't we just sit down and try and come out with some common data standards in a way that is sensible, rather than this panic and fear that when somebody says, I want to see a data protection request, then it's a complicated and difficult journey for all concerned.
Yes, Paul.
Paul Longley from University College London. Do you have any comments about the difficulties in linking the observable and the virtual worlds, given the ease with which it's possible to create multiple online identities?
No.
I should say I'm Paul Longley, but my groceries are being delivered to Paul Lumley to get latest
well, I think in terms of the security and the identity bit I mentioned earlier on, I think that's something that is increasingly important, and with the recent sort of outing of Twitter trolls, etc., there's more and more focus, I think, about actually where are the opportunities to actually see where people are having multiple identities, but it's also looking at sharing the techniques that a lot of either government agencies or retailers or financial services companies are using to say, you might think you're really clever because you're hiding behind a PayPal account on this part of the dark web, but actually in reality there needs to be some tangible identification of a bank account or some mechanism for doing that. And I think that's something where, as people realise through this sort of data leakage and this sharing of information, suddenly what you thought was secret actually isn't secret. So there was a report, I think, from Gartner saying actually 80-90% of UK citizens think that data privacy doesn't exist anymore. And I know when I was looking at one of the apps that was doing data leakage, it was a dating site that not only recorded your activity on the dating site, it actually provided the dating site with what other websites you visited it as well during that particular browsing period. So there's a lot of information out there, and it's just trying to work out what's the value and what's driving people's behaviour to pull that together. Cool.
Absence of hands going up. I'll ask a question which I mentioned to Martin earlier. Do you think there's any gap between what people say with reports like Demos and the fact that, almost on a behavioural economics view, the fact that Facebook actually exists?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a counter logic between this, and I think you saw that coming through in terms of actually how prepared are people willing to share data, how aware of that they actually are sharing data. And I think as we've moved into this digital age, doing back in the day when you were doing accompanied mystery shopping experiences and stuff like that, or watching people through CCTV in terms of how they moved around a shop, they may not necessarily be aware that they were sharing data, they were sharing information. So there's definitely what are they prepared to do, what are they thinking, but also what is the reality of the situation as things move forward. But I think with like the cloud breaching and the photos being sort of downloaded and security breached, I think people will either change their behaviour going forward and actually realise that privacy doesn't exist, and you make that decision, you get on with it, or actually you'll see, like some of the demos categories, people will just say, I'm not prepared to share that information. And I think as more and more that develops, then it's going to be interesting going forward to see how that affects consumers' behaviour, and whether or not you've got, there's an app at the moment which actually, when it's requested for information, it doesn't block it anymore, it actually fills it with junk data. So it will give false information about location, false information about your browser behaviour. So the added dimension of not only are you getting information, actually is it real, or is somebody feeding you duff data? So yeah, very difficult. Cool.
Any more questions? Yeah. Yes, in the front.
From AXA. Do you think thank you. Do you think in an industry like ours, so for example, like insurance, where the relationship with the customer is not very frequent, there's still an opportunity for personalisation?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we're looking at as we get more and more information and customer touch points, so looking at telematics, so black boxes in cars, do you use wearable tech to have black boxes on human beings? How can you pull some stuff together that actually makes sense? And when you look at some of the the potential for car insurance going forward, that it will detect you've had a car crash, it will call the breakdown recovery, it will file a claim, it will do X, Y and Z. What's going to be interesting is, does it know who was driving? Does it know whether they were meant to be driving? Does it know whether or not they've had a drink? Does it record images to actually show who's at fault? And I think this is where you'll see more and more things developing that's actually pulling this information together. And I think the challenge on personalisation is, does it deliver what the business wants? Does it deliver what the consumer wants? And actually, a bit like the Disney experience or my mobile phone experience, is it a move forward, or is it just lots of data and lots of things happening and it's not actually solving the big issues? Cool. You done?
No, one more, I think.
Martin Callingham. With every talk I hear about this general area, one is struck by the proliferation of massive amounts of data that exists about all of us, but it's all unstructured and structured in time, in place, in the sorts of variables essentially that are being collected. And it does strike me that very little attention is currently being addressed to the complexity of analysis of that data, either in terms of creating an individual record which tells you about a person and therefore you can do something about that, or in terms of a collection of data across millions of people or few people, whatever, where you try and draw some sort of analytical conclusions from it. And it's probably not a question, it's a bit of a waffle, I'm afraid, but it does seem to me that a lot of the debate is about the data that is being collected, with very, very little attention being addressed to the fascinating future opportunities of discovering new analytical methods. I don't know whether you have any comment on that.
I totally agree. I mean, I think what's interesting for me in terms of having that structure around that data is looking at some of the opportunities to drive that. So whether or not you've got some of this consumer-led, facilitated by a third party that says, tell us about yourself. So almost like Facebook, in terms of some of the profiles, some of the structured information. So whether that's coming through from that consumer side, or whether it's the industry saying that if you provide this information in this format, it makes it easier for us to use, therefore we'll reward you. Or the third way, I suppose, is something like the mobile phone technology, where my understanding is they're going to be able to sort of share transmitters as you move around the country now to change sort of blank spots to address that issue. Is there going to be some standard mechanism, so that handshake communicating between the mobile phone and the mast, which is saying, okay, you've got this map code, you've got your location, can you extend that says your map code is linked through to your individual ID, which has got some other information around it? So it's either sort of driven by an engineered solution, the industry or the individual, but I think there's some interesting opportunities out there, and more people are looking at this for making money out of it.
Barbara Wright from AXA PPP, and you did not plant this question with me, Martin, but I'm just quite interested in that. Obviously, data sharing it's becoming a reality, and data collection, it's a reality. And organisations seem to be very up for the fact that with this data, what they feel is benefiting customers. But from my own personal point of view, and what you've shared with us from Demos and that kind of thing, that customers actually, some don't really want that. So do you think it's up for organisations to all get together and kind of put the benefit to you question, or is it more that organisations reassure their own customers and all other organisations can just get on with it? Because I feel that there's a real disconnect, actually. So just be interested in your thoughts.
I think there's probably two answers. It's going to depend on the consumers, and I think the Demos slides in terms of that classification are, if you can come up with this is a model that's about sharing information with you and you can see the tangible benefits. So you look at some of their loyalty card experiences in recent time, that's worked really well. But what you've seen more recently is the challenge from those low-cost retailers that say fundamentally what's most important to the consumer is the price. And I think as we go forward, they're taking that model and expanding it. Is people might actually share more information with health providers. If you get knocked down on by a bus, it's stored on your mobile phone with your blood type, your next of kin, your GP's address, or any other miscellaneous information. So you've got to see the benefit of it. And in the early days of mobile phone technology, a lot of people were very wary about sharing their location. But I think it was the RSC actually marketed a phone with a blue button on, and actually what that happened is it rang, but it also transmitted the location of your breakdown. And it was, so it's sharing that information for the benefit that's at the control of the individual rather than allowing them to pick it up. And it was an interesting experience in terms of taking people reluctant to share that information, but on their terms, actually saying, I want to share it now because you're sending a recovery truck. So you can see the benefits. So it's going to be different answers, I think, for different people. But I think if it's useful and that trade-off makes sense, then people will do it going forward.
I think we've got time for just one more question, if anybody else has another question.
Cool.
No, in which case, thank you again very much, Martin.
No worries.